Yeah, I know that's what they said, but they said after 4 hours, if it doesn't go away, you should call. Hello and welcome to the Halcyon Weekly Show. I'm your host, Lorne Riseley, and welcome to the first in the new format of the Weekly Show, whereby I'm going to be going through things on a day-by-day basis. That's right. Every day I'm going to be bringing you the news in one bite-sized chunk at the end of the week, so it won't be news anymore, it'll be olds. So there you go. And on today, which is Monday by the way, let's start with a topic that's bound to get me into some heat. According to the news, Kevin Spacey, primed actor and face of House of Cards and that Call of Duty that you played once just because he was in it, has apparently come out as gay. Now this isn't the controversy. The controversy came when, unfortunately, these come in tandem, or rather after, allegations that he made advances towards a 14-year-old child actor by the name of Ray something. I did my prep work for this, I promise you I did. I did my prep work because his name is Anthony Rapp, or Ray to his friends. And, well, the issue here is quite simple. They're allegations for the moment. There's no hard evidence, there's circumstantial evidence, and a guy who's come out and made the accusation in light of a cascade of other allegations in Hollywood right now. So what do I have to say about this issue? Well, again, the people of Twitter have taken to Twitter to sort out the problem, so thank God for people and their opinions. Let's take a look, shall we? There's one here that says, I'm not interested in Kevin Spacey being gay. I'm curious as to why he's conflating sexuality with the molestation of a minor. Stay on topic. Again, that's a stretch considering that that's not what the allegation alleges. He made sexual advances if it's true. Again, not great, but again, I hate this trend on Twitter of people taking things to the extreme. I'll give you an example. The other day I was in the midst of a Twitter argument, as you will know if you'd watched my previous episode, which focused on nothing but that particular incident. And in the instance, the guy I was arguing with was saying, basically you're saying, and my response is always going to be the same, which is, just because you say basically you're saying doesn't give you carte blanche to finish off that sentence with whatever you like and then act like that's what I said. These days people need to realise that when you state something, you shouldn't have to explain it. People shouldn't have to read into statements unless they're primed for something specific. The reason why I say this is because you have to spend an awful lot of your time when you're talking to someone these days explaining the pretense of the thing you just said. And the reason for this is because people never take the time to let you answer a f***ing question when they ask you it. Now, as it pertains to this, I do appreciate the fact that it's a very sensitive topic and it's fresh off the press. No one really knows a tremendous amount about this at the moment. Kevin Spacey is, of course, a prominent actor, and him coming out as gay is kind of a big deal because, well, it's Kevin Spacey. Of course, that would make news normally, and the fact that he's almost, if it's a ploy to try and withdraw that accusation and subvert it, then yes, it's a very poor one and in very poor taste to say the least, considering that, well, the best defense to that kind of accusation is to deny you did it because you didn't do it. If you did it, then I would suggest finding out who Michael Jackson's lawyer was and paying him whatever he wants. As far as the Twitter thing goes though, I'm afraid this is probably going to be a running topic. Every news outlet seems to have an enemy or a rival or something to that effect to keep them going throughout the course of their existence, and mine appears to be everyone on Twitter. Because every time I see someone go, here's the news, well basically that means this, I guess we live in a crap world. Well, maybe you should try learning, reading and understanding the pretense of the quote and sticking to it rather than running with your own news story. So, as bad as this news story is, it comes back to the fact that Twitter is the enemy to truth and the enemy to actually resolving any issues. Because if this is a systemic part of the same issue that seems to be plaguing Hollywood right now, I don't again see what use attacking a single individual solves. If he has committed a crime, which it's debatable at the moment because it's all circumstantial and the statutes probably run out anyway, that's a crap law. I have to say one thing about the Americans. The 3-strike rule they have over there when it comes to their laws, and the fact that they have a statute to limitation on when you can be prosecuted for a crime, even if you're guilty, is absolutely ridiculous. And if he is guilty of such a thing, of course he needs to be tried, he needs to be penalised, and he needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law if it's possible. However, at the moment, if it's just allegations, people on Twitter need to shut the f*** up! Because nothing you say at this point is going to serve a purpose or help. Maybe expand the reach of this story, but it's Kevin Spacey. Who the hell isn't going to hear about this stuff? I was going to do a tweet of the day on this one, but unfortunately, one of these things is... Oh, and it's also nice how people feel the need to clarify things on Twitter when we could all figure it out for ourselves. I've got another one here. Coming out as a gay man is not the same thing as coming out as someone who preyed on a 14-year-old. Conflating those things is disgusting. I know they're not the same thing. By definition, they're not. But thank God you were here to clarify that for me. My lack of grasp on the English language wouldn't have even struggled to conflate those two things. So thank you very much for clarifying that for me, random Twitter user. In any event, that was Monday's edition. Let's go to sports. Sports? Thanks a lot, you handsome bastard. And on sports, over the course of the weekend, Anthony Joshua took on Takam. I forget his first name now, unfortunately, because, well, having studied him originally, his boxing style wasn't exactly the most exciting, and I only barely remember his fighting style and last name. However, it was a decent fight. AJ goes on, canvassing the crowd for where you should hold your next fight in Cardiff. Maybe wasn't the best idea when you go, who wants to go to Vegas? Yeah, we all don't have money, we're all here because we're local. Seems like a really good idea. But in terms of fights next, who the hell knows? I liked getting into an argument on YouTube. I get a lot of arguments on social media these days. I wonder if it's because I'm a bastard. But anyway, in terms of fights next, I still firmly believe that Tyson Fury is still in the mix. Of course, he is living his life coked up and full of pies. But instead of sort of saying, oh, he can't be done, Muhammad Ali came back after a 4-year retirement. Sugar Ray Leonard came back 3 times. George Foreman made a comeback at 46 to win the World Heavyweight Championship, albeit the shittest version of it. And there's a myriad of different comeback stories. So Tyson Fury is 28 years old. He's nearly 7 feet tall and he weighs about 20 odd stone when he's fighting fit. So it's a bit early to rule him out of the running to come back, if you ask me. So that concludes this section of the sports edition of the Monday part of the weekly show. Let's turn now to Tuesday. Tuesday? Yeah, I know, but it's still there. Like 4 hours is one thing, but 48 is getting ridiculous now, man. You've got to sort this out. Oh, hello, welcome to the Halcyon Weekly Show. Welcome to Tuesday, the slow motion dick punch that's been an absolute git of a day. So in today's news, well, the Kevin Spacey thing seems to be rumbling on a little bit now that he's being revoked from pretty much everything, everywhere. Netflix are going after the guy, having said that his show has been cancelled, albeit that the producers have said that the show was going to be cancelled from the beginning, so they don't really understand why they would announce that, perhaps for some kind of public brownie points. However, on this edition, Tuesday, let's focus on a slightly more life-affirming story. Over the course of the weekend, Linkin Park, a popular rock band and pretty much the soundtrack to my youth, held a remembrance concert for one of their band members, their lead singer Chester Bennington, who sadly passed away this year as a result of suicide, most likely due to depression. Now, the reason I raise this news story is not to dwell on the negativity of it. Chester Bennington was one of my personal heroes, an individual who I modelled myself after in terms of my creative outlets, my design choices, my style of artwork, my style of presentation. I even tried to emulate the way he sang, but my voice box is not what you would call talented, as you can see. So what I wanted to dwell on this occasion, though, was the concert itself and what a unanimously positive experience it was. A couple of things I'd like to point out, though. When people were singing Numb, I'm not entirely sure the crowd were understanding that they need to catch up with the song in order for it to sound weird. It sounded like one of those old school chain singing sessions that you had back in the day when you were in school. So one side sings a part and then the other one starts singing and they kind of mesh over, and it's supposed to be this really nice, heartwarming effect, when in actuality it just means that everyone's kind of out of tune with the song. However, the concert itself sounded great. You could tell Mike Shinoda had to put in a lot of effort and emotion into the first segment of the show.
I was at we were doing like a photo thing when I found out about Chester. And for hours I was just in disbelief. I didn't believe what anybody had to say about anything.
However, I do have one teeny tiny gripe in that why couldn't anyone pick singers who were actually any good? There were a couple of singers. The first two, the guy with the glasses, who I forget the name of, and I'll put the name here or here depending on what I'm feeling. And then the second guy who came on, who sung in a much more solemn tone. So the first guy had a singing voice that was nowhere near the emotional level that Chester Bennington usually brings to his songs, or even the same tone, or even the same cadence. It was Shadow of the Day. He didn't carry in the tones or anything like that. It was just a bit So the second singer just had this Chris Cornell kind of style of undertones and things of that nature. And then they got I believe a Japanese guy who really tried to bring the passion, but who also sounded very much like a Japanese teenager screaming into a microphone with no real talent, albeit, and this is a big albeit, Blink-182 sang Miss You and then What I've Done. Now up until that point, and I watched the whole thing by the way, 3 hours and 20 minutes of it was pretty sweet. They broke me. They broke me, damn it. Too much emotion, too much, it just all came flooding in and it just got to me too much. It's a shame really, because I was kind of hoping to carry myself with a degree of dignity. And I'll share with you a quick story. When we were younger, I'm talking 17, 18, when this wasn't quite such a well-fed and wrinkled exterior, we would go to the occasional Linkin Park concert. Two I've seen live, in fact, one in Nottingham, one in Milton Keynes at the Bowl for Project Revolution. On both occasions, and I posted this on Facebook and Twitter, I screamed something because, well, Chester Bennington was my hero. He is an absolute god. The tattoos, the hair, everything. I just wanted to be just like Chester Bennington. And to see that he's passed away, and the fact that his memory lives on through the band, what they'll do next I don't know, but the fact that his memory carries so much cadence and there was so much emotion in the audience that night, it just did me good. It did my heart good to see that there's still some semblance of humanity left out in the world that can come together, even if it takes a tremendously tragic set of circumstances in order for us to be able to do that. However, on both occasions, I couldn't help but scream out, and I don't care if this makes me sound gay as a mother. I love you, Chester, because god damn it did I love that dude. He was just the most awesome rock star I'd ever seen, an artist. I've got his albums on the wall where the artwork is just excellent, and it's imaginative and creative and different, and all the kinds of things that I aspire to be as an artist and content provider. It's just a tremendously good way to sort of bookend this chapter for the band, albeit I worry about them going forward, because Chester Bennington was the voice of Linkin Park. If you replace him with somebody else, it's a bit like replacing Kevin Spacey as your top actor for every top actors list that you've made. And don't lie, motherfucker. Everyone was licking the shit out of his arsehole up until very, very recently. One accusation that's unproven and everyone's jumping ship. No one's going near this motherfucker. He's not done anything to discredit the rumours though, just to come back to that story from yesterday, so he should probably hire a publicist that can do his statements for him. Maybe, you know, considering that he's on a political drama, you'd think he'd handle public statements just a little bit more, in a more nuanced way and suave and sophisticated. Anyway, that concludes this section of Tuesday's news, the slow motion dick punch of a day that it was. Let's go now to sports. Sports!
You might see the contact here where it was made. Ooh.
Ay, ay, ay.
Contact here where it was made. Ooh. Ay, ay, ay.
Oh my God!
Thanks a lot. You get more and more handsome every day, you lucky bastard. Oh, hello there, and welcome to sports. On this occasion, we're going to be talking about Lewis Hamilton's win that crowns him the greatest British driving champion of all time, something to that effect. He's won a 4th world championship, and kudos to him. The reason why I touch on this story is because I hate Lewis Hamilton's, the way he carries himself these days. If you watch his original videos for McLaren and back in the day, he was a reasonable dude, seemed really nice, passionate, but really nice all the same. These days though, he's like the Formula 1 equivalent of Justin Bieber, and that makes me angry in a way that I can't fully convey. the fact that you see him hanging out with Neymar and they have competitions for how stupidly they can dress, considering how much goddamn money they've got, really begs belief. Now, I think it's important to say that Formula One has this trend of sort of alienating its audience by illustrating just how expensive the sport is and how rich the people that participate in are. But in this particular instance, hey, let the dude have his moment, I say, and to be honest, it looks like he's already planning to leave Formula One behind at some stage in the near future, considering that he's got his hands in music and other forms of entertainment beyond racing. So, kudos to him, but let's just all remember this moment when he inevitably gets in trouble for beating up a female celebrity, because he definitely seems like the type, let's put it that way. That brings to, well, that's not going to get me into trouble, I'm sure, but anyway, that brings to conclusion Tuesday's edition. Let's see if Wednesday's any better. Wednesday! Yeah, man, it's all gone. I mean, to be frank, now after this experience, I'm thinking about calling Guinness and seeing if they can maybe set me up for a world record. Hello and welcome to the Halcyon Weekly Show Wednesday's edition. Welcome to a rather somber edition of this, purely because the poor people of America are having to deal with yet another terrorist attack of some description. This time with a car, albeit they've been the subject of many attacks recently, all of which it's difficult to wrap your head around, and there's nothing even remotely funny about the situations themselves. Terrorist attacks have this odd way of uniting people to a certain degree, but then dividing them the minute it becomes a question of how to resolve the issue itself. The reason why I wanted to touch on this particular edition is because the gun debate is coming up in America again, and it's not something that I've touched on tremendously in my previous incarnation of the weekly show, albeit it's something that I wanted to talk about, mainly because you see in America that there is a bipartisan movement that progresses things, and it's all about the idea that if you participate, then you'll be rewarded on the back end, especially if your political party, has a certain belief system, or you yourself hold a political belief system that's in keeping with a party that you want to see progress. However, America's laws are set up in such a way that people in power tend to stay in power. The reason being is that the electoral system for the presidency of the United States of America is from an outdated system from something like the 1800s, when most people couldn't read, most people couldn't write, and also votes were physically carried on horseback to and from towns to ballot polls in order for people to be able to tally them up to find out who won. And even then, the decision ultimately is made by an elected official as to who that state or province votes for. Now, this has a knock-on effect because policies in America are formed majoritatively by politicians, senators, congressmen, things of that nature, but these people often pander to the most, shall we say, vigorously democratic element of their populations. And I want to talk about this because of the NRA. In America, the NRA are outnumbered by many different organizations. And yet, however, they hold one of the biggest political sways in America. And the reason why it relates to this particular incident is it could have been a car, but it could have been a gun, it could have been any means to cause terror. Now, at least with cars, they make the distinction of making you have a license in order to be able to drive, and AMPR technology is getting much better. So if a car's stolen, it can be reported so and detected within minutes. Also, it also means that cars, there are certain safety measures and things like that to put in place to be able to prevent people from going overboard. With guns, not so much. The reason being is that they're protected by the the Second Amendment, which prohibits the banning of guns and allows people to take up arms. But again, that amendment is rooted in the fact that the country itself was formed by people that were rising up against tyranny and needed guns in order to facilitate the takeover. I speak as a British person reporting on this, and we were the bad guys in that situation according to history, considering that they're the winners and we were the losers. British people have a lot to answer for, generally speaking, in terms of their hereditary responsibility on the world, but nevertheless, that's a conversation for another time. What I wanted to talk about here is the fact that it links into what I've been saying with regards to Twitter and things of that nature. What I think people misinterpret sometimes about the way I enunciate things is that I think people shouldn't have an opinion, or that opinion's invalid, or something to that effect, and it's not the case at all. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, albeit that I ask that it's informed. You can't just blurt out something, if you're going to have an opinion on something, it is your responsibility as a diligent individual to read up on these things and, I don't know, maybe understand what the fuck it is you're talking about before you go on Twitter ranting and raving and judging people and deciding people are guilty before any evidence has actually been presented to a court of law. Anyway, as it pertains to the gun argument, the reason why it's interesting to pick up is because, like I mentioned, the NRA in terms of number could be easily ousted in terms of their power. You could easily implement gun control. You could easily implement a myriad of different measures to ensure that this kind of action in terms of a usage of a gun is a thing of the past. It would never happen again. It's the reason why Canada and Australia and places like that have implemented certain degrees of controls, and they'll put the causation effect to one side for a second, saying, look, there's less people, there's less guns, and there's more in them. Well, right, but they're symptoms of the larger problem. And this applies to a myriad of different subjects, most of which that I've talked about. If you're going to exhibit anger, and you're going to expend energy on anything in terms of trying to affect change for the positive or for something that your perspective holds as positive, because unfortunately most of the time we can't even agree on what we think is positive and what's negative, then you need to make sure it's done in an efficient way. You need to make sure that it's going to be expended in such a way that is actually going to affect change, rather than currying favour with people that ultimately won't carry the ball over the finishing line. And you see this happening a lot these days. I make these videos with not really any inkling as to where I'm going to go until I look at the subject. I might lean more conservative, I might lean more liberal, I might be completely off the top of my head and come at it with a different perspective occasionally. But on this instance, I just feel like if people understood that if they were to rally behind a cause, understand the root of that cause, make sure that they understand that no cause is completely righteous, none whatsoever. Every single cause invariably has some degree of issue with it, then that I can fully get behind. Ranting on Twitter about these things and posting epilogues and posting condolences and changing your goddamn profile picture changes precisely all. And unfortunately, it's one of those things where if you don't actively participate in the solution, then you are affording the problem to continue. And unfortunately, I fell into this habit of thinking that my voice had no meaning, had no impact, and that's a problem for the general public. They then look for ways that they think it can matter. And in this instance, I think that people need to understand that terrorism, in specific in this instance, if it is related to terrorism, it's far too early to sort of insinuate that it is, considering that this event has only just happened, and obviously with the Las Vegas shootings, that was motivated majoritatively by people thinking at least it was a mentally disturbed individual, but we'll never know for certain. However, the root cause of these issues is facilitating these people with the ability to be able to take up arms and seek this kind of information, these kind of echo chambers in the first place. They're symptoms of the larger problem, and we're all victims of echo chambers to a certain extent. These people being sucked into the world, into the rabbit holes of belief and idealism and fanaticism is something that I think to a degree we're all guilty of these days, because we all want to see that voice. We all want to find something that resonates with us and then embody ourselves with it. We want to cocoon ourselves in it. And that's a dangerous prospect. Everyone should always be open to the prospect of hearing someone else's opinion and taking it on board. Even if you ultimately still disagree with it, you can still assimilate a degree of it into your own arguments and philosophies going forward, and it will make them more rounded and you better for it. Now, unfortunately, this segment hasn't been particularly funny. I appreciate that, but I hope you understand that the gravity of this particular incident didn't really warrant much in the way of comedy. So let's throw it now to sports and hope that that can spice up things. So, without further ado, sports!
Now what happens? He's saying some more. Well, the pictures tell the story.
Yes?
Bon anniversaire.
And we're at sports. Thank you very much. On this episode, I'm just going to be talking about the handbaggery that occurs in football on these occasions. Jose Mourinho, one of the best things to ever happen to journalism in this country when it comes to the sports pages, because every time he utters something from his mouth, he is the equivalent wrestling heel.
This is Jonathan Wilkes. Mourinho is in the mouth of Ollie Murs. For the first time he's won the pitch at Old Trafford.
He's just someone that knows how to pull at the strings of the media, in the sense that, oh, if I give them just this one little line, but 99% of it is perfectly reasonable, then they will bite like a mother. And on this occasion, he's laying out different barbs to different people. And the reason why I want to touch on this is because, again, people look down on me for liking wrestling to a certain degree, because they think it's childish.
Going up top. If Okada hits it, he'll win. If he misses it, he loses. It all comes down to this. Oh! Take a look. The elevation, the impact.
Because they, the insinuation that it's fake and things of this nature. But what I love about wrestling, and the reason why I continue to watch it to this day, is because it's kind of a microcosm of how politics, currying favor, and social norms, it's all in this kind of self-enclosed little bubble that you can observe and sort of examine in of itself as a wider extension of the world, which is why it's interesting. Little things like racism in wrestling is very prevalent, which again mirrors the real world. Politics in wrestling mirrors politics in the real world as well, in that the most popular people curry the most favor, even if they don't warrant it. And with Jose Mourinho, he's a classic wrestling heel. He's not there to be loved, but he is there to be loved by a certain demographic of the audience who understand what he's trying to do, while the rest of us run around pulling our hair out, going, oh my God, I can't believe what he said, I can't believe what he said.
I didn't speak. It was Billy the Masseur that spoke to the team. Bill? He was screaming so much in his Scottish, I didn't understand really. I didn't understand, but the players were clapping. Okay, let's go. 2 horses and a little horse.
And your little horse?
A little horse that still needs milk and work and learn how to jump and.
Rage! It's just funny as hell to watch him pull at the strings of social media, the public as a whole in terms of footballing. You don't even have to be a football fan to watch this guy and hate him. So I'd recommend, if you have got time, go through YouTube and go through some of the comment sections on Facebook and Twitter and things like that, and see some of Mourinho's greatest barbs, because I think the greatest one I ever heard wasn't necessarily one I enjoyed at the time, was Mourinho's barb at Wenger saying he's an expert in failure.
You know, he is a specialist in failure. I'm not.
Do you know what nemesis means?
Which was brilliant, because he then led Chelsea to an almost relegation level of form before getting sacked. I think Wenger won the FA Cup that year as well. So maybe an oversight on his part on that occasion. Anywho, that's Wednesday done and done, so let's throw it now to Thursday and hope things can pick up a little bit. So, everybody with me now? Thursday! Are you there? Yep, it's back again, and it's even worse this time. It's like a goddamn python living down there. Please, you've got to tell me how to... hello and welcome to the weekly show. This is Thursday's edition. On this occasion, we're gonna have to talk about the story, because it's a story that just won't seem to go away. Hollywood's sexual harassment scandal that seems to be rumbling on and on, with more and more people coming out of the woodwork to say that they were molested or sexually assaulted when they were 14 to 17, to varying degrees of outrage, considering now that it seems to just be a tidal wave of excuses. The only thing I can equate it to is that Hollywood is effectively engaged in what can only be described as some sort of sexual scandal Royal Rumble, with celebrities being tossed over the ropes of dignity and self-respect, one by damn one. And today we've got two events. In fact, let's give you a choice. Let's give you a couple of choices. Let's see if you guys are up to date with the news. Let's see. One of these celebrities has been accused of sexually harassing a colleague or a contemporary or just a random person. So on the left-hand side, let's have Dustin Hoffman. Okay, we'll have him over there just as a choice. And over on this side, we'll have Jeremy Piven. Let's have those two. Which one of those two do you think has been accused on this occasion? Is it Dustin? Are you leaning more towards him because he's older? bit grey, a bit more mischievous, you know, a bit more pedo looking? Or are we looking at Jeremy Piven because he's well renowned as being a bit of a dick? Which one is it going to be? Which one is it going to be? You're wrong, it's both of them. This scandal seems to be rumbling on, and it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. Now, while this is good in terms of holding people to account for actions that were clearly out of bounds, it's one of those things where we really need to take an opportunity to look at this as the corrupting force of the power of corruption when it comes to people in high-ranking positions, and how we can combat this going forward. Because I think it's fair to say that most of us, when subject to that kind of star power, or if we're starstruck, if we see someone who's famous, our inhibitions are lowered to a certain extent because they're deemed to have a degree of authority over us that we wouldn't afford other people. For younger people, their impressionism is going to be a problem, because young people are just naturally more impressionable, especially when they see something that they aspire to be in terms of an actor or a musician or a sports person or something along those lines. And that's why I think when sports people say that they're not role models and actors say that they're not role models, I disagree to a certain extent, because they have a degree of exposure and a degree of power, if you want to describe it that way, that other people, normal people, even politicians to a certain extent, don't have. Now, it is worth it pointing out that a politician today has been outed, the Defence Secretary, I believe. Indeed, a gentleman by the name of Michael Fallon. One newspaper described it as something akin to a sex storm, which, to be perfectly honest, just leads back into my Royal Rumble analogy, in that there was a sex storm that threw them all out of the ring at the same time. I just think that this particular, I don't know what you want to call this epidemic, but an epidemic indicates that this is all happening now, and this is all supposedly happening over the course of time. It's all coming to light now because people feel emboldened to make their statements and make their positions clear on the matter, which has to be commended. There's no two ways about it. I can understand why people would be reluctant, or at least hesitant, considering that most people will have their lives literally ruined by making this kind of accusation. There are invariably going to be false claims. I think, considering the frequency and the nature of some of these claims, I think it's fair to say some of them are frivolous. And it all started with Cosby to a certain extent, because of how systemic and how well known these issues were, that led into Weinstein, that's now led into Kevin Spacey, that's now led into Dustin Hoffman, which will lead into Jeremy Piven, which will lead into a myriad of different celebrities. And you've also got Savile, Rolf Harris. These are all people with immense power and connections beyond our wildest dreams. Now, how do you combat this? I think it's very simple. I think we need to wake up and realise that celebrities are people that we haven't picked. Celebrities, well-known individuals and people of that nature are not people we put in power or we put in positions of authority based on their moral compass or their standing within society. Now, yes, celebrities do a lot of charity work, and they expend some time and resources in the pursuit of assisting humankind, if you want to call it that. However, they're actors, they're sportsmen, they're people that set out in life to pursue a better life of luxury, fame, wealth, and you're going to compromise a lot in pursuing those things, including probably your morals. So maybe we need to start looking at celebrities and people of power with a degree of humanity, in the sense that we need to realise there's a beautiful saying, and it applies so well in situations like this. Everybody shits. Everybody shits. Beyonce, yep, she takes a hot steaming dump every now and then. Brad Pitt, you better believe he's had some diuretic nights in his time. And you better believe that just about but Justin Bieber, I'm sure even his hate him when they protrude out of his butthole. But you have to remember that these are just people. Frail, fragile, flawed, warped, weird, freakish people just like you and me. And so to be shocked by the fact that celebrities and people of authority would abuse this power is kind of naive to a certain extent, but by the same token, it's an eye-opener into the fact that we afford these people way too much license and freedom. Yes, they're granted power to a certain extent, but that's what the fuck's money for. That's what your reward is. You don't get to throw your weight around or anything. And I suppose, to not sound crass in just discussing that as element of the topic, I would like to make it known that I genuinely feel for anyone that's been put in that position. I've been the subject of not peer pressure, because I've never taken drugs, I've never smoked. I have drunk, so I can't say I'm completely innocent. My first sip of Jack Daniels was someone handing me a drink and saying, try this, and I just necked it. But I was never happier, because Jack Daniels is a sweet, sweet friend of mine. But coming back to the point though, we were all young and impressionable. I think, again, parents, people in positions of authority, actual authority, politicians, teachers, the armed forces, and indeed any civil servant needs to take an active role in trying to reaffirm people's investment in their societies and communities, and that way maybe this cult of celebrity will subside with time, because there was a time when, yes, there were one or two celebrities, but it wasn't a tidal wave of people with this kind of power. And I really genuinely believe that if we reaffirm the values that human beings are just that, and if they attain a certain degree of wealth, that's fine, but we shouldn't covet that. We should always be pursuing what we want, and you shouldn't look at someone else being famous as, you know, license to then lower your guard and put yourself in positions to be exploited. Or better still, if they do seek to exploit their power, feel that they can always come forward and not have the jeopardy of ruining their lives as a realistic prospect, which dissuaded a lot of these people from coming forward in the first place, and legitimately so. If you look at Crosby and I suspect Kevin Spacey, there will be countersuits at some stage once the tide, the storm has settled to a certain extent. They want to recoup some of their lost publicity. That these people are not good people. I think we've already established that. So I think just the moral to take away from this situation as it develops and as it continues to get worse and worse, and the rumble comes down to maybe one or two celebrities that we can hang our hat on. If I'm going to place a bet on any two celebrities staying wholesome, it's going to be Helen Mirren and possibly Keira Knightley. I would have picked Angelina Jolie, but she looks like she's into some freaky shit. Tom Cruise has sex slaves chained in his dungeon. I would imagine Angelina Jolie has whatever her equivalent would be now that she's gotten rid of Brad Pitt. Just a theory. Anyway, now that we've covered that light-hearted topic, let's throw it now to sports. Sports!
USA, Kina, Korea, Kanada släpper. Koreanen kommer tillbaka, amerikanen åker ut, alla åker ut, bara australiensaren. Femman står på benen in i mål.
LOL! And thank you very much. Sports. Not a tremendous amount to talk about in sports today, you'll be happy to hear. It's just a wrestling-related story, basically because I like wrestling, so deal with it. WWE was in Glasgow yesterday. Triple H was there. Everything seems fine so far. And then he came out in Shield gear. Why? Makes literally no sense. Just for people who don't understand, recently WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment, the wrestling show, yes I know, 27 is still watching wrestling, bite me. They've had a spate of injuries, absences, sicknesses, illnesses, probations, suspensions, and all manner of reasons why people have left, including a few wrestlers actually leaving the company because they, well, hate their lives. And in the midst of this, Roman Reigns, a fairly prominent member of a fairly prominent faction within the WWE, The Shield, I know, such a cool name. You want to know more about them now, you're Googling them as we speak, I know. Stop, watch this video first and then go Google them. He's been ill. I think he got some variation of the mumps virus, which is what they call it in America, or something along those lines. And he's had to have stand-ins. So his first stand-in was a gentleman by the name of Kurt Angle, an Olympian who won the Olympic gold medal with a broken frickin' neck. Again, Google it, look it up. Kurt Angle's amazing. So he stood in for Roman Reigns in a few matches. Triple H just stood in for one, and the reason why that is because in storyline, in kayfabe, he's supposed to be their mortal enemies. I get it was a house show, and house shows are quote-unquote non-canon for those of you who like televised series and things of that nature, but it really annoyed me, because wrestling isn't supposed to be for kids. It's simulated violence. I wouldn't show my daughter wrestling without, you know, just cutting it to the sweet-ass promos of The Rock or Stone Cold or whoever I happened to be watching at the time, but not the actual in-ring action, because if it looks as good as it should be, it should look real, and therefore the story should emulate, and they're not really at the moment. They treat wrestling fans like dopes, and that frustrates me again to a level that I can't quite convey. Maybe this will do the trick.
Kids, won't you step outside for a second?
So yes, the only reason why I wanted to talk about the story is because I wanted to issue a direct threat to the WWE. Stop insulting my intelligence and book accordingly. Anyway, that'll bring sports to this to the end on this occasion. That just about wraps up Thursday. Let's throw it now to the best day of the week, and you know the one I'm talking about. Friday? Thank you very much, Thursday, and welcome to Friday, the last and the best day of the working week for you people, because I happen to be working tomorrow, so suck on it.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, The Miz is the new.
In other news, if any of you have been following this episode throughout the course of the week, you'll be happy to know I have managed to get rid of that problem. Unfortunately, you keep catching me at the beginning of the video. I had a snake living in my trousers. It was like wrapped around, and it wasn't a python, it turned out to be a cobra. Why? What did you think it was, you perverts? Get the smut out of your head and get with the show. Yeah, it was the best I could do. I was writing that to a climax and it really just didn't pay off to anything in particular. Anywho, crappy jokes aside, let's talk about Friday. And unfortunately, the story that's going to dominate this very quick edition on Friday is the one that's been running throughout the course of the week. Kevin Spacey is now being investigated by the UK police after it's alleged that he's made several other runs at other people, grabbing someone's crotch, I believe, a Mexican actor. So having had, the week to kind of reflect on all the evidence and the statements that have come out, what do people think? What's their verdict on Kevin Spacey? Let's take a look at some considered arguments.
Help! I've escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement! Help me!
Guilty! 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 Nah, not really. It's still allegations at this point and investigations are pending, but it is one of those situations now where not only is Kevin Spacey being investigated, pretty much everybody has got some kind of sex scandal going on. In fact, let's play a very quick game. Let's play who is currently subject to a sex scandal. Yes or no, answers only please. Answers in the description below. Question 1. The UK Parliament. Are they under a sex scandal at the moment? Yes! Yes, they are. Correct answer there if you got it right. Hollywood. Yeah, we already know this one, so just go ahead, just tick that one there. Okay, great. The Teletubbies. Yes, I'm afraid so. There's some startling allegations that are surfacing about Dipsy. Tinky Winky never saw it coming, unfortunately. It's a really dark time for that show, and I just hope they can persevere without Dipsy, replace him with somebody else, preferably someone, with good moral standing.
Dipsy.
To be fair, this whole situation is only good for one party and one party only, the Catholic Church, because for the first time ever when it comes to sex scandals, they can take the moral high ground with this, which is frankly outstanding for them. I mean, bad for everybody else because it means that everyone else in the world is currently subject to a sex scandal, but still, swings and roundabouts, and look for the positives where you can find them. So that brings the news element, because we're not going to dwell on this because we've been talking about it all week and it's profoundly negative and disturbing. So let's just throw it straight to sports, where we've got 2 news stories that are worth looking into because, well, they're peculiar to say the least. So for the last time this week, sports.
Hey. Oh, down he goes. Boy, Iglesias in pain right now. Where did that one catch him? Ouch.
That's a direct hit.
Nope, I think we all know what happened.
Would you dance if I asked you to dance?
Thank you very much. There's the sport. I caught the news throw to sports there. It's a metaphor. Look it up. So, 2 news stories worth bearing into consideration today. Number 1, Gunner supporter here. Santi Cazorla's been out for God knows how long, and today we found out why. He's had part of his arm grafted to his leg, and you can tell because part of the tattoo is on his leg. It's the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. Apparently he got gangrene and had to have his Achilles tendon was being eroded by the infection to such an extent he was missing about 8 inches of his leg. So he's had part of his arm grafted onto his leg to cover for the skin while he's had surgery. He's looking to recoup, but man, what a gnarly story that is. That is pretty badass, if I don't say so myself. And I wish to hope Santi Cazorla a speedy recovery. I hope he's back with us soon. He's 32 years old, so he needs to get his skates on if he wants to, not see that contract out and get released. But I hope he comes back nevertheless, and I hope he makes a full recovery. Second story, though, also to do with legs, funnily enough. Patrice Evra. If you haven't heard of this already, go Google it. It's amazing. So yeah, Patrice Evra decided to go absolutely mental on someone in the stands. Let's take a look now, shall we? Yeah, no, that was pretty gnarly, wasn't it? The ban has not been administered yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lengthy one. However, it has to be pointed out the defense of the person being kicked in the face was that he hated Mondays.
Tell my man shut up.
Yep, that's what I would say if I was being kicked in the face by Patrice Evra, had him misheard perhaps what M word ending with a Y and having 2 syllables in it would have been. Again, we live in a progressive society, but we live in a society where the excuses aren't getting much better. Nevertheless, that covers the news, that covers the sport for the week. So thank you very much for watching this new and improved edition of the Halcyon Weekly Show, where we actually cover events that happened in the course of the week. So thank you very much for sticking with us for that. If you like this edition of the episode, please like, share and subscribe, and leave your comments in the comment section below as to how I can adapt, maintain, change and edit this otherwise amazing show to be better, more entertaining, or at least to maybe not offend so many people. So please stay tuned, check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Enjoy your weekends and take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of the Halcyon Weekly Show.